Masterclass Webinar. My name is Sally Meyer-Yip. I'm the founder and MD of 11K Consulting. Today, we are very privileged to have a very special guest with us to tell us all the secrets about winning the Chinese market. Today, we have Kristina from the Head of Business Advisory at Woodburn Accountants Advisors joining us. Hello, Kristina.
Hi, Sally. Thank you for having me.
Are you today?
Good. Very good. I'm in Luxembourg at the moment.
In Luxembourg.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us. And may I briefly introduce you? So Kristina is a leading expert on inbound investment into China over the past 2 decades. So Kristina has lots of experience in corporate services and compliance. She is an expert speaker and author of publications about investments in China. And she has worked with so many 500 plus international companies across industries and sectors on the Chinese market. So today we really just want to steal all the good ideas from you can apply for yourself. Hopefully.
I'll try.
Yeah, so really leveraging on Kristina's expertise. So today's theme is all about getting prepared to win in the Chinese market. So you know that right from the start, you're going to win the Chinese market if you do what Kristina is going to say. So the first question, if I can ask Kristina, what are the current big opportunities for Western companies in China, and especially in the property-related sector?
So I'm not too familiar with the property sector, but if you do look at the property sector, there are certain restrictions, and you do have to be a little bit careful right now. I don't know if we can say post-pandemic, but during this pandemic phase, because there are some of the large state-owned real estate companies that have gone bankrupt.
Yeah.
But so, you know, investing in real estate is something that I would be careful on, and I would really advise you to check on the legalities of it. Again, because, you know, you buy a property in China, but it's not for life. You've got a 50-year term where it belongs to you, and then in theory, you're giving it back to the state. So you need to understand what the legalities are, the types of properties you're investing in, whether you need to have silent partners in that investment, etc. But if you look outside of the real estate market, I mean, the biggest trend that I'm seeing is really into the e-commerce side of businesses. And the main reason specifically is with the fact that the borders are shut with China, or it's very difficult to get into China right now. It's the easiest form of doing something there, of grasping the opportunities, grasping this digital world that has peaked significantly over the COVID pandemic. So, you know, if you are selling any form of consumer product, food and beverage, electronics, cosmetics, fashion, this is where I would place your focus right now, because although there is a large upfront investment, capital investment that's required to set everything up, eventually you do see returns. Not necessarily in the first year, but definitely within the first, second, or third year.
Great. Yeah. So anything digital e-commerce.
Correct. Yeah.
Are still having huge opportunities.
Yes.
Excellent. And what are your top tips for property or luxury companies when they are considering whether they should even invest in the Chinese market? What would be your tips for companies?
So I have several tips. The first one is, if you're already thinking about China, number one is register your trademarks.
Yes.
So if you're a property developer that has a significant brand name abroad or globally, make sure that you're registering that. If you are a consumer brand, make sure that the number one priority you focus on is registering your trademarks and making sure that you have the ability to use your own brand name in China, right? I think that's the basic foundation you have to create. The second one for me is research, right? If you have too many questions still in your mind about the Chinese market, it means that you don't have the right data at your fingertips answering those questions. So, for example, if you're a property developer and you're looking to develop property in China, or let me take it that way. Where in China? China is enormous. Is your focus Shanghai? Is your focus Chongqing? Is your focus Mongolia? Where is your focus and why? Right? What's the population that's there? Why are you attracted to that location? If you're trying to attract Chinese investors to purchase properties abroad, where's the money? Where's the wealth sitting in China? Is it in the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities? And then if you say tier 1 cities, where's your focus going to be in terms of attracting that wealth, right? If you're in consumer, and like I said, digital cross-border e-commerce is really a very big trend and an easy first step to get into the market, then are you analyzing your competitors? Are you looking at the data of who the consumers are? Don't focus on the full portfolio of products. Narrow that down to what you think will actually work into 1 to 3 product types. It's really doing all of this market research data gathering, right? That all of your questions that you have regarding market entry have been crossed off. The T's have been crossed, the I's have been dotted, and you know the answers to everything. Without that data at your fingertips, you are winging it. You're not making solid decisions based on actual data that you've received. You're making assumptions. And the minute you start going into China based on assumptions, that is a journey to success that will take twice the amount of time.
Great. Very, very wise advice. Yeah. Do your homework.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. Get help if you don't know the answers. Yeah. What are the common mistakes made by Western companies when they enter the Chinese markets?
There's a lot.
Maybe
and I've written a book about it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of mistakes that happen. I think the first thing is that a lot of people get excited about China. And I just want to also highlight that a lot of the mistakes are led by the characteristics of leaders. It does not stem from the actual activity that you performed. It stems from the decisions that you have made as a leader going in, right? So mistakes like not getting the right advice from the right providers.
Yeah.
That's number one, right? There are thousands, tens of thousands of service providers in the market, and there are some that are good and there are some that are bad. It's as simple as that. So have you compared? Yeah. Have you received referrals? I always say a conversation is free of charge. So talk to as many people as possible. And again, it's a comfort feeling, right? And try to get references that you know who you're working with. The other mistake is just putting a lot of reliance in local employees or local providers versus taking on the responsibility yourself. Mm-hmm. So, it's saying, and what do I mean by that? It's saying, we can't get into China right now. Borders are shut. I get it. I understand that. Does that mean that you should be going into the Chinese market and saying to a distributor or a property agent, I just give you the project. You deal for it. You deal with it for me. So you're putting all of the control in them versus taking the responsibility of maintaining the control and just delegating. There's a huge difference between those two things. You give somebody the work and they just go ahead and do it, but do they do it right and up to your standard? Or do you take control of the project and you say, I'll delegate pieces of the work so that I keep control of the full picture? And I always say when you go into China, there's two things you shouldn't underestimate. Number one is the financial resources that are required, and the second is the time resources that are required. If you don't have the time available at your fingertips to pay attention to this project in China, don't do it. Right? You can't spend 5 minutes a day on it. You need to spend your full work day on it. Right?
Yeah. So many people ignore the time element. They thought,
they completely ignore the time element, and it does where it's you have to estimate that into the project, right? So you have to analyze at that point: is China a market for you or not, right? And then that leads me to the data gathering. The data should tell you: is the investment worthwhile?
Yeah.
right? And to what extent is it worthwhile? And then if you decide to go to it, if you decide to actually do it, don't do it blindly. Pay attention to the business.
Yeah.
Right? And not just on a monthly basis. It needs to be done on a daily basis with the team. I always say that one of the things that you have to create for yourself in China is an ecosystem that can be made up of employees in-house or outsourced. And it's an ecosystem of providers, whether it's real estate agents, it's lawyers, accountants, HR professionals, digital marketing experts. You know, you've got this ecosystem of people that are there to support your business and help you to grow. If you don't have that ecosystem, it's not going to work, particularly in this day of the pandemic where you can't physically get there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you've got to build this group of individuals that are going to, first of all, have the same vision as you, the same work ethic as you, and are willing to take this business and scale it up. So having that ecosystem is vital. And again, like I said, service providers and even employees, you have good ones, you've got bad ones. It's a matter of don't be lazy, compare, right? Talk to as many people as possible, interview as many people as possible so you have somebody who has the right fit. The last thing I just want to highlight on the mistakes that happen, a lot also has to deal with fear.
Fear.
Right? Right now, people are not pressing this green light to get into China because you can't physically get there. So they're saying, I can't physically get there, so what's the point of starting there? Well, if the data is telling you that you're going to get a return on investment in 12 months, that's why you should be hitting the green light, not because you cannot physically travel there. We've had to change our mindset or pivot our mindset to a new world where traveling doesn't exist anymore, right? So how are we going to continue to grasp this opportunity by not being able to travel? People have the fear of not putting a huge capital investment into the project. Well, the data should show you what your competitors are spending on marketing. If they are spending, I don't know, $100,000 a month on marketing, and this is the trend you're seeing amongst 5, 6 of your competitors, well, then that's the amount you should be spending. And if you don't have that money financially, okay, then you back away. But if you do, then invest it. Yeah. Because then the return will come, right? And again, it's a web, right? If you don't do the data, how can you make these decisions? How can you eliminate your fear if you don't have the right answers at your fingertips?
Yeah. Yes, very wise advice. So really, the common mistakes are not getting the right partners or suppliers on the ground, delegating too much in some way.
Yeah.
You have the control, build an ecosystem in China, make sure you invest the time, the people, the finance required in order to make that return on investment work for you.
Yes.
And also, like you said, have the right data so that you are not like fearful.
I'll just add one more to kind of close off the picture, which is adaptation. And what I mean by that is that a lot of people make the assumption that they have a very successful brand name. And this is the same for real estate companies. I put this into a bucket of every single foreign investor, right? Yeah. It's adaptation in the sense that you've got this brand name that you've developed in your home country, that you've been able to spread globally, and now comes China. And the assumption is that we can take this brand name and just sit it down on the ground in China and not have to tweak it, not have to adapt it. But the Chinese market is so unique. Yeah. The people are so unique. The culture is so unique that you have to take your brand and adapt it to China. You won't have a choice. You will have to change it, tweak it, somehow make it local to attract people to it, right? So adaptation is also a big mistake that people maybe are a little bit stubborn on. Say, well, it's worked when we went to the US, but the US is a similar culture to the UK, right? Yeah. China is so different. You cannot compare. It's not an apples to apples comparison. Yeah. So it's really understanding how to adapt your brand and then adapt yourself as a leader. You know, when you go into China, you have to be very open-minded. and not be stubborn in your Western mindset. You have to adapt yourself more to an Asian Chinese cultural mentality. And I don't mean now that you have to understand how they, do business and all of this type of stuff, but it's just, the important things. Like if you are able to get back, eat the food that's in front of you and don't complain. Just put it in your mouth. You might actually find you like it, right?
Just eat
drink
it.
and enjoy and take it as a new experience versus closing yourself up, building a wall and saying, well, when I go to China, I definitely won't do that. Well, then you won't succeed.
Yeah.
Because you're not adapting yourself to the market. So adaptation is a very big point for me as well.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for your 5 wisdoms. Yes. So the next question, do you think PR or branding is important for Western companies in order to succeed in China? And if you have any example of a Western company who is doing really well in terms of building their brand reputation in China?
So I'm not going to say any brand names because there's always a little bit of controversy with every brand in terms of what they do in China. It depends how the media portrays it, I guess. Yeah. Is branding and marketing important? Yes. Why? Because you're a Western brand. Do the Chinese know you? Well, that's a question that has to be answered. And again, that comes with the data. Have you done a brand awareness study? Have you done a loyalty study? And it's not just understanding whether people in China know your brand, it's understanding whether they know your products and the category that your products fit into, right? So again, is branding and PR important? Absolutely, because it will allow people to know who you are, but ultimately you also have to understand whether people know you or not, and that comes with data research. Do people know you, yes or no? And how many people know you, and from which cities do they know you, and how did they become aware of you, right?
Yeah.
And that's all data gathering. Whether companies are successful in China, absolutely. First of all, though, I wouldn't mimic the Chinese culture. Be very careful. That's a very fine gray line how that might be interpreted. I forget whether it was, I don't want to make that mistake, but was it Gucci that did the chopsticks ad? It was one of these high brands, and then there was a huge controversy.
Gabbana, not Gucci.
Oh, who was it? Dolce & Gabbana, exactly, right. So, so, I mean, again, it's a successful brand in China, but that marketing campaign went completely wrong for them in China. So you have to be careful, right? There's a fine gray line in how you do your marketing. Are brands successful? Absolutely, they're successful. But then why are they successful? It's because they've either got Chinese staff or they've outsourced to Chinese providers who know how to attract Chinese consumers to their brand, right? They've built an ecosystem of professionals who can guide them on this and create very successful campaigns in the market, right? The question, of course, comes again is what are your financial resources to be able to use these professionals, either hiring them in-house or outsourcing, and what's your marketing spend? Yeah. Right? If you haven't sold yet in China, the feedback is always, I don't want to spend too much money because I don't know if we're going to be successful or not. And there's no magic number. I think people are always expecting a magic number. Kristina, tell us, how much should we be spending on marketing every year? What's the average? Like, no, there's no magic number. Nobody should be telling you a magic number. If you spend $250,000 on marketing versus 20, you'll get more resonance than if you spend the 20, right? Yeah. So it's more, what do you have available at your fingertips? What are you willing to invest in that marketing? Great. To build up your brand. Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with you. As a PR expert or professional, I do understand that, especially for the Chinese market, trust is so important. And in fact, there are data researching that the China market trust the most globally. So in order to build up your reputation, you need to build that trust, which require to do different things.
Yes, I totally agree with you. Thank you.
You used a really good word just then, reputation. So I think I just want to highlight this point as well, is that when I arrived in China 18 years ago now, all Chinese companies were attracted to Western brands. And they approached you to say, please let me represent you.
Yes.
Right? In 2022, it has completely reversed. These Chinese companies will no longer approach you. It's actually, the trend is you approaching them, trying to convince them to work with you.
Yeah.
Right? And these Chinese companies are going to do their own background check on your reputation, on your global reputation, on maybe the existing reputation you have in China, to see whether they're interested in working with you. It's a complete reverse of dynamics, right? That the reputation side and building up your reputation in China and investing in building that up is critical to build the ecosystem that you need. Because providers nowadays are being very picky on who they want to work with, right? So don't underestimate that either when it comes to PR building, marketing, and more specifically building up your reputation.
Yeah. So this leads to our last question very nicely. So what are your top tips on building that long-term trust and relationship with Chinese clients and counterparts? Do you have any secret tips for us, Kristina?
I don't have secret tips. I think the number one thing is communication, right? Sally, you're sitting in the UK, I'm sitting in Luxembourg, and then there's the folks in China, right? And obviously the pandemic has caused us to not be able to travel to go back. I did 21 days of quarantine in Hong Kong. I can tell you I'm not doing that again.
No.
I'm not, that's just not something I will do. So, how do I maintain my communication? Well, number one, it's with my team, right? My team is based in Shanghai. I communicate with them daily, right? Then key providers. I have either bi-monthly or monthly phone calls with them. Then it's with my clients. I have monthly calls with every single one of my clients. It just so happens that most of the decision makers of my clients are abroad anyhow. But it's building up these bridges of communication that's not just email and WeChat, but is actually using a physical phone or a Zoom video conference call, where it can be a 10-minute chat where actually you don't talk business at all for that 10 minutes. You're just seeing how you are, right? How's life? How's everything going? How's business in general? And obviously, if there are specific questions regarding the actual business, you go into it. But it's really more of a chat. It's maintaining the relationship and the communication, right? It's sending a broadcast message on your WeChat to every single contact you have to say, Happy Chinese New Year, how's life? Right? Things don't always, people make the assumption that when they deal with China, it's always business. They're people too. We can have normal conversations with them as well and just see how they are. Wish them Happy Chinese New Year. How's life? How's family? It doesn't always have to be business centric.
Yeah.
And it's developing these relationships. We always talk about guanxi, and I don't want to reiterate what guanxi is, but guanxi basically is formulating and maintaining long-term relationships with your counterparts in China. And because of distance, because of the pandemic, because we're not traveling, there is a loss of communication. The bridges are falling. And if I can give you one tip, maintain those bridges. Have calls, have chats. And this all leads me to probably a nice conclusion is, this all requires time.
Yes.
If you don't have the time resources available to do this, then you won't succeed in China. You have to have the time available to focus on that business.
Yeah, it's almost like genuine interest in the Chinese market for long term.
Absolutely. And interest in your partners, that you want to work with them long term, right? Yeah. Interest in your employees, that you want them to stay with you, right? Because you care. It's how you behave with your staff in the UK should be the same way you behave with your providers and team in China.
Yes. Yeah. Totally agree with you. I guess for Chinese people, we are more like a family, in the sense
well, as Westerner, I mean, as a Westerner, having lived in China, I left because of COVID, but I was there for 15, almost 16 years. My family is not in China. So my ecosystem becomes my family. So as a Westerner residing in China, you develop naturally this family of your business partners or friends, right? Your employees, you start doing activities with them. You go to the parks on weekends, you go out for a drink. It naturally becomes that they are your support system in your personal life. Obviously, when you're sitting abroad, it's harder to maintain that because you're not on the ground, but it doesn't mean I cannot call them and say, hey, how's life? How's your daughter? Or, hey, I heard your grandfather or father had an operation. Is he okay? You know, it's taking an interest in their life, and you'll find that loyalty creeps in, and then people want to stay with you.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, exactly. Great. I thoroughly enjoy our conversation, Kristina. So I've been making like 6-page notes. And I think my top takeaways are really to do your research, invest in time and finances in order to make it work. It is a market with huge opportunities, but it doesn't just come easy as well.
Yeah.
So in order to really win the Chinese market right from the beginning, to do proper research, to build a team, to find the right suppliers, and removing that fear by not knowing can really help you to win the Chinese market in a very long term.
Yes, yeah. I always say, I always use the phrase, it's all about building a solid foundation.
Yeah, yeah.
If you build a solid foundation of data, research, ecosystem, business model, financing, time, then all you need to do is scale up, because you're not taking 5 steps forward to then take 3 steps back because the foundation was crumbling.
Yeah.
Foundation is there. So in theory, all you're doing is moving forward. Right?
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. I love this conclusion of our China Masterclass webinar. And thank you so much for spending time to talk to us today.
Oh, it was my pleasure, Sally. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So back to the listeners, if you really like this webinar, please do share with your networks. And you'll be able to find Kristina's contact details at the end of this webinar as well. So please feel free to reach out to Kristina if you have any problems about compliances or corporate services in China. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sally.
Thank you.